Hello and welcome back to the Bookshelf Odyssey. My name is Art, and we are exploring my bookshelves, and specifically, we are exploring the works of Elizabeth Gaskell. As we are celebrating here Gaskell in April, also known as Gaskapril. And so today I thought it would be fun to create an Elizabeth Gaskell themed tag to do for Tag Tuesday. So to start off, if I'm not going to tag anybody specifically to do this. If you are participating in Gaskapril with me, if you are reading along with our North and South read along, consider yourself tagged to do this video as your way of helping to celebrate Gaskell in April. I look forward to watching how you would answer these questions. So what I thought I would do is create a reading tag based on the themes of 10 of Elizabeth Gaskell's works. Some of these I have not read yet. If one of the tag prompts doesn't really work for the book, let me know and I'll try to see if I can tweak it. But it's a work in progress, I suppose. And if you're not subscribed, please do subscribe to me. And if you're participating, I'll try to make sure I'm subscribed to you as well. If you have a booktube channel, you don't have to have one to participate, but we'd love to have your comments on these videos. All right, so without further ado, here is our Elizabeth Gaskell themed book tag. Number 1, North and South. Name a book where the main character moves to a new place and has to adapt to a different culture or lifestyle. And I'm going to try not to pick any books or works by Dickens for this prompt. We're going to see if I can do it. What I'm actually thinking of is and I know it's only April, but the Mrs. Claus mystery series by Liz Ireland. I've talked about that before, and on my Christmas channel and podcast, we're doing a Christmas through the year book club, and that was the first book we just read this past month for our online book club is Mrs. Claus and the Santaland Sleighs. But this really of books I've read recently, this really just suits this prompt very well. You're going to be tired of me talking about this book, but it follows a young woman named April who ends up getting married to Santa Claus, and so she has to move to the North Pole and adjust to that whole lifestyle. That there's a lot of changes. She has a new position, a new life, a new culture to adapt to, and then throw into the mix a murder mystery. And it's a delightful, cozy mystery series. So I would recommend that. And really, just about any cozy mystery would be a good fit here because, especially the first couple of books, really deal with that, where the main character moves to a new location, has to adapt to a new lifestyle. Really, another one that comes to mind is Darcy Hannah's series, the Beacon Bakehouse mystery series. That's it. So that's the North and South prompt. Read a book, name a book where the main character moves to a new place and has to adapt to a new lifestyle or culture. I really enjoy those fish out of water stories. So I'm looking forward to hearing from what you would have for that. Prompt number 2, Cranford. Name a book that takes place in a small town or community, and especially if it's a small and cozy town kind of vibe and read. And that really is what Cranford is. I did a buddy read last year, and our discussion on that book really made me enjoy it, and just the whole small town coziness vibes that I get from that. So a book I would pick is one I just finished reading, and it's called The Bookshop on the Corner by Jenny Colgan. And it tells the story of a woman who loses her job at a library, and she kind of just takes a big step, a big challenge, and buys a giant van, stocks it with books, and drives around selling books in Scotland and places like that. And I absolutely love this story. Just her whole journey of finding what she wants to do. This book was everything that I had wanted the book Lovers to be about, but that seemed to be focused more on the romance side of things. I thought, but this one, The Bookshop on the Corner, is such a celebration of books and reading that it filled that lovely wheelhouse that I have of reading about books that are about books or libraries and bookstores. I love things like that. So that is a really good match for this prompt. Boy, and it makes me want to just sell everything I have, buy a van, and drive around the country selling books out of the back of a van. I mean, that would be incredible fun, I think. But might I don't know if that would be a viable way of supporting myself. So, uh, I guess something I can look forward to in retirement, I suppose. The third prompt is wives and daughters. Name a book about family relationships, either found family or biological family, because I enjoy stories about both. I think I might actually enjoy the found family stories better than even biological family stories. I have not read Wives and Daughters, but from what little I could gather, some of the themes about in this book deal with family themes, deal with relationships. I mean, I would think that to be the case with a title such as Wives and Daughters. Now, I know a lot of you have said you really love this book, and I'm a little worried because Gaskell died before she was able to finish this book. And I read, The Mystery of Edwin Drood by Dickens, knowing that the book wasn't finished and it was only about half done, I guess. And I really am not sure I want to read another novel that doesn't come to completion that I enjoy so much. So, without spoilers, if you can just at least reassure me it would be worth the read, that it wraps up most of the plot lines, that has a more or less satisfying ending, I'd appreciate that. I do plan to read it. I just want to kind of be prepared when I go into it. But again, the prompt is name a book about family relationships, either found family or biological family. I would suggest the book The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. The synopsis is that described in this way: fleeing her old life, Rosemary Harper joins the multi-species crew of the Wayfarer as a file clerk and follows them on their various missions throughout the galaxy. The novel concerns itself with character development rather than adventure. Each member of the crew has a story that unfolds or a crisis to face. They encounter several alien environments on the slow path to their destination. I really enjoyed that book I read just last year. I'm looking forward to reading more in that series. And I think, from what I could tell, that maybe it doesn't follow the same characters. I'm not real sure. But I enjoyed this book so much. And it's very much that starship family vibe that is one of the things, for instance, I love about Star Trek is that, whether it's the original series, The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, any of the modern series that are out, you really develop this feeling of found family. Also, The Mandalorian would be another TV show that kind of has that idea behind it. Although that's Star Wars. And I do know the difference, so you don't need to, send me hate mail. But yeah, the book A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet is good science fiction. It's a good story, good character development, just as a synopsis said. So I'd recommend that. Number 4, Ruth. Name a book that deals with social inequality or discrimination. I haven't read this book yet, so I don't really know what it's about. But from what I can gather, this would tie in well with some of the themes of this book. I would suggest reading Esther Waters by George Moore. It was first published in 1894. And it says, set in England from the early 1870s onward, the novel is about a pious young woman from a poor working class family who, while working as a kitchen maid, is seduced by another employee, becomes pregnant, is deserted by her lover, and against all odds decides to raise a child as a single mother. Now, and that's not really a spoiler. That a lot of that happens all in, like, I'd say the first third or fourth section of the novel. But what I found about that interesting about that is just the frank discussions about the challenges that Esther Waters had to overcome, the discrimination people placed upon her because she was a single mother, even though it wasn't her fault as such that she became pregnant, but her decision to keep the child and not give it up for adoption or anything like that. She makes a decision to keep and raise the child herself, which comes with a whole set of problems she has to work through. It was a very powerful story, and I was amazed at how blunt and frank it was in regards to some of the issues. And I'm trying to be a little careful because I don't want to give away spoilers, but I think that book would really fit this story quite well. This book prompt quite well. Number 5, Mary Barton. This one I'm excited about. Name a book that takes a sudden twist in the middle and ends in a thrilling fashion. I read Mary Barton a couple years ago now and absolutely loved it. And it starts off a little bit slow, but about halfway through, one of the characters is accused of murder, and it's like this twist that suddenly just the book just takes off. And the book I'd suggest for that is called The Cabin at the End of the World by Paul Tremblay. I did talk about that book in a previous video. It tells a story of two dads with their daughter vacationing at a cabin in the woods when four strangers show up saying that the end of the world is about to happen unless one of them sacrifices themselves. And it just takes off from that point. And I would say, I don't know if it's directly about halfway through or so, but there is something that happens that really just was hard to read. It was difficult. It was emotional, but it completely changed the course of the book. And actually, I would say probably there are several things that did that. And if you can handle it, I think it's a worthwhile read because it really covers the idea of what is real, what isn't, how can media manipulate us, and would you sacrifice yourself or your spouse or a loved one to save humanity? Some pretty interesting ideas in that book, but again, that book is not for the weak of heart, but not really a cozy read by any stretch of the imagination, but it is a delightfully twisted novel. Number 6, Sylvia's Lovers. Name a book with a complicated love triangle. I have not yet read Sylvia's Lovers. I did get that book for Christmas, though. I'm looking forward to reading that here real soon. I don't know if I really enjoy that trope, and I'm not even sure that this book, Sylvia's Lovers, has that. Again, I'm trying to make a best guess here. I'm just going to go with, I think, The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. I know even that book is also a bit controversial because of some of the violence that kids enact on other kids. It is harsh, it is bleak, but it is really good. And I'm not even a big fan of that whole love triangle in that story, but it certainly is complicated because if you don't know, again, The Hunger Games is a post-apocalyptic novel and really a trilogy that is basically the United States is divided up into different districts, and every year each district has to send 2 champions to the Hunger Games, where they basically fight to the death. And then the winner of the Hunger Games, that district receives, it's been a while now, I think it's some kind of a bonus, maybe extra food or something for their society. Katniss Everdeen is the main character. She's I think a very fascinating, strong main character. There's a love triangle that is being manipulated by the government that is running the Hunger Games. Yeah, it's pretty brutal, but I really, really enjoyed that book. The rest of the trilogy is okay. I don't know if I actually quite liked the way it ended. This first book is classic, and I think it stands on its own as peak post-apocalyptic literature. Prompt number 7 is The Moorland Cottage. Name a book that takes place in a rural setting. I have not read that. It looks like that's where this book takes place, so that's kind of the prompt I came up with for this. So for that, I would suggest reading Dandelion Wine by Ray Bradbury. I said I wouldn't mention any Dickens books, but Ray Bradbury is still game. And that book takes place in Greentown, Illinois, which is a small rural town. Bradbury writes kind of a fictionalized version of his life growing up, or at least it was inspired by his life growing up in Waukegan, Illinois. I think it's such a wonderful, cozy, nostalgic read. This is just a work of poetic fiction that is beautiful and heartfelt, and I really recommend it. There's not really much of a plot other than it's kind of follows Douglas Spalding throughout a summer of, I think, 1920 something or 1930 something, and just his adventures throughout the summer. Think of it like Huck Finn, but interesting. Okay, well, sorry for all of you Mark Twain fans out there. All right, enough of that. Number 8, My Lady Ludlow. Name a book with a strong, independent female character. Boy, would I mean? Can I just say Jane Eyre? Because Charlotte Bronte and Elizabeth Gaskell were friends after all, and Jane Eyre might not seem like a strong, independent female character, but I believe she is. Even though it seems like she is pushed around a lot. Mr. Rochester kind of gives her a hard time, but it's such a classic story. I think a lot of you have probably read it, and if you haven't, I'd really recommend you do it. It's one of those, if you're going to read Victorian novels, you should at least read that one, even if you don't like it. It's such a foundational one. But yeah, I find Jane Eyre to be, though she's seems meek and mild, she has a very strong independent streak to her that she turns down. Again, a couple some minor spoilers for Jane Eyre, but when she turns down Mr. Rochester's proposal because of reasons, and I know I don't want to spoil a 200-year-old book, but and then later in the novel when she also turns down St. John's marriage proposal because she has character and she has her beliefs in her. I guess I mean she's just true to her character and what she wants out of life. And she's not going to marry a man just because they asked or just because, her life will be better being married. That's some of the culture that perhaps this book is speaking out against. Really, I think Anne Bronte, you could throw in The Tenant of Wildfell Hall. That would be one that has a strong independent female character as well. So look to the Brontes. You probably find one that fits that prompt. Speaking of Brontes, number 9 is The Life of Charlotte Bronte. Name a book about the life of a famous author or artist. And I think I would suggest Mrs. Gaskell and Me by Nell Stevens. And what it is, it's kind of a memoir of Nell Stevens learning about Elizabeth Gaskell and exploring Elizabeth Gaskell's life, as well as exploring her own life, Nell Stevens' own life, and how the two have intertwined. What she has learned along the way by studying Elizabeth Gaskell. It's a fantastic read that I would love to see more biographies like this. That I know they're not as academic, but I really like that personal journey. That here's some stuff about me, here's some stuff about this author that I really really enjoy, and here's what I learned about her, and here's how she impacted my life. Another one I really enjoyed was Take Courage, Anne Bronte and the Art of Life, and that one is by Samantha Ellis. Again, kind of that similar drive of a memoir reflecting on this author, what she learned about her, and how that impacted her own life. And that one I think it kind of moved me to tears. It was so beautifully written. Samantha Ellis does take some, I think, unfair pot shots at Emily and Charlotte while trying to defend Anne. And I can understand that Anne is kind of the unsung hero of the three sisters, and those of us who really enjoy Anne Bronte's writing over the other two try to want to promote her a little bit more than the other two, but it just maybe does skew a little bit mean at times. Just to be aware of that. It's really a worthwhile biography. Both of these books are fantastic. I'd recommend them. And I have not yet read The Life of Charlotte Bronte. I understand some of the criticisms that are against the book, but I would be really interested to read what Elizabeth Gaskell has to say about one of her friends. And then number 10 is The Gray Woman. Name a book that explores female empowerment and survival in the face of abuse. Now, The Gray Woman is a novella, short story, kind of longer short story, and it follows a woman who marries this horrible man, and because it's the Victorian age, she does not have much recourse. She tries to escape his evil clutches, and how she does that, or if she does that, it is quite an incredible journey. It feels very modern at times. You realize just how much at the mercy of men and their husbands that these women were. There was really not a lot of options for them. So in this story, the gray woman, she tries to take back control of her own life. It's not easy in the process. It's a thrilling read. It's very tense. It reads like a modern day thriller at times, and I just loved it. On my podcast, the Bookshelf Odyssey podcast, I actually read that story back in the early days when I first started the podcast. I think I read it in 3 parts, and I'll link those down below if you want to listen to me read that story and some of my thoughts on it. There's also an interview with someone from the Gaskell Society as well that I enjoyed talking with her. So I'll leave all that in the show notes below. You can find those episodes there. So yeah, name a book that explores female empowerment and survival in the face of abuse. I'm just going to, on the fly here, I'm going to change that. It doesn't have to be about abuse, but basically a book about female empowerment. And I want to suggest the book called The Homemaker by Dorothy Canfield Fisher. It was written in 1924. And I'll just give you a brief synopsis. Evangeline Knapp is the perfect compulsive housekeeper, while her husband, Lester, is a poet and a dreamer. Suddenly, through a nearly fatal accident, their roles are reversed. And so what this novel explores is that because of an accident that happens to Lester, he has to stay home and heal, but isn't able to get work. So Evangeline goes to work. Considering the time it was written, this novel was very, I think, probably caused a ruckus, considering what it's about. I think this story definitely promotes female empowerment. It shows that a woman can be a successful business person just like a man can, and which today, of course, we'd think, of course we can. But she's considering the years it was written in. This book is really taking that thought by the horns and shaking it up. And on top of that, what I liked about the novel is that it shows, and so some mild spoilers here, but it shows that Lester, as he becomes a stay-at-home dad, and it shows that he becomes very good at that too. And they're both happy in their roles. And the big conflict comes when what happens when Lester gets better and he's able to return to work. Does he go back to work? Does Evangeline go back home, where she's supposed to be, quote unquote? That is all explored, and it's absolutely fantastic. I would highly recommend that. As certainly it's society's expectations that are limiting her, and because of her fierceness and courage and ability to succeed in a field that is completely dominated by men, she's able to find empowerment, and it's a fantastic story. And I think this one would suit that read quite well. It's not anywhere near the same genre as The Gray Woman is, but it's one I think more of us should read. I like that it is a novel that explores that gender roles without making either of the genders seem stupid. Like today, I think in a lot of modern sitcoms, for instance, you've got the strong, capable mom, and the dad's just this giant goofball idiot, and you see that a lot. And as a man, I kind of laugh because there's a lot of truth to that, to those portrayals, but also it kind of ticks me off because, I know that there are men out there who are fully capable of not acting like an idiot every time they enter a room. But all that aside, what I love about this is that it shows a positive light on really both genders going against what is quote unquote expected of them, and both doing very well at it. And I think it's just a very thought-provoking novel, and it's entertaining too. I'd highly recommend it. So that's the Elizabeth Gaskell tag. And again, if you are participating with me in Gaskell in April, if you are a fan of Elizabeth Gaskell's works, by all means, consider yourself tagged. I'm kind of leaving this open for anyone to be considered, but especially if you are taking part with the read along, I would love to hear your thoughts on this, or to see your videos that you would put out, and start tagging people, and we can get this book tag around and see how people would answer these questions. So again, you'll find the questions linked below, and I look forward to hearing how you'd answer that. So until next time, happy reading, everyone, and take care.